Ayato lives in a world that revolves around the power controlled by 6 powerful academies. He used to live with his father and half-sister, whom he adored with all his heart and promised to protect. But 5 years ago, his sister went to the Seidoken Academy and disappeared after a couple of months, never to be seen again. He lives with that guilt every single day and has been surviving on the hopes of finding her sister again one day. He's a powerful young man who trained relentlessly in his family dojo and has finally gotten accepted into Seidoken as a scholarship student. While going for his first day at school, he spots a handkerchief falling from a window. He grabs it before it hits the ground and jumps up to the window to give it back to the person to whom it belonged. He jumps to the window and looks inside, but is horrified to see a girl about his age getting ready for school. The girl gets super embarrassed to suddenly see a guy in her room and asks him to turn around, which he does quickly. She calmly looks at him and asks about the reason he came to her window. Ayato quickly responds that he just came here to return the handkerchief, which he found falling off her window, and tries to explain how it was all a mistake. The girl, however, seems unfazed as she walks towards him, takes her handkerchief back, and thanks him. Ayato releases a sigh of relief, but it was too soon as the girl turns around and tells him that now it's time for his punishment for coming onto her window. Before he could even balance himself, she attacked him with a fire blast. He quickly dodges it and jumps out of the window. He falls to the ground and is soon followed by the girl. Because of the commotion, a bunch of students start surrounding them trying to see what's going on. She accuses him of trespassing in her room. Ayato tries his very best to make amends by constantly apologizing to her and trying to dissolve the situation. The girl, however, has already made up her mind and is hellbent on fighting with Ayato. She introduces herself as Julius, rank 5 of the Seidoken Academy, and challenges him to an official duel. He tries to back out of the duel, but she isn't ready to let him slip by. He even tries telling her that he isn't even completely registered here as a little bit of paperwork is left, but she refuses to listen. Finally, he tells her that he can't even fight because he doesn't even have a sword, and at that very moment, one of the guys in the crowd throws his sword over to him, saying that he could use it for the time being. Ayato curses his luck and decides that there is no other way out and he will have to fight her if he wants to leave. He draws his sword, and she draws hers before beginning her attack. She summons a bunch of fire spears and shoots them towards him. He is quick on his feet, however, which surprises her as she thought he was just a beginner. She again summons a bunch of fire spears and throws them at him, but even this time he is able to dodge and deflect them all. She starts losing her patience as she can hear people talking around her about how the rank 5 of Seidoken is unable to defeat a newcomer. She creates a giant fireball and blasts it toward him. He runs in and is able to slash the fireball before it could reach its full potential, and he rushes towards Julius as he sees a light spear going her way. He jumps on her and pushes her out of the way, saving her life from the unknown assailant. She gets embarrassed and gets up again, ready to fight again. Before she could initiate, however, an unknown girl interrupted them, saying that their duel was null and void. Julius tells her to identify herself, and she introduces herself as Claudia, the president of the student council, who outranks her and officially cancels the duel, claiming that Ayato still has a bunch of paperwork due, which stops Julius on her quest to take her revenge against Ayato and gives him some time to catch his breath. Claudia takes Ayato away and takes him to her chamber, where she officially welcomes him to Seidoken, explaining to him that the world of Asterisk is controlled by the 6 strongest academies, and at one time Seidoken used to be the strongest amongst them, but lately it has fallen from grace and is now considered to be one of the weakest. She tells him that she hopes he gets stronger and takes part in the Festas, which are the competitions in which every school participates to duel against other schools. He tells her that he has no interest in any kind of competition, which prompts her to ask for the reason he came here. He thinks for a second and then replies that his sister came to study in Seidoken 5 years ago, but then she disappeared one day out of the blue. She opens up her computer and searches for the name of his sister, only to find a corrupted file with all the data gone. She asks him whether he has joined the academy to find her sister, but he replies that, to be honest, even he doesn't know why he joined the academy, and maybe it's just because he wanted a purpose in his life. She doesn't interrogate her further and directs him to his class, where he finds his classroom teacher, who instructs him to sit by Julius, who also happens to be in the same class as him. During the lunch break, she stands up and looks at him before telling him that she forgives him and owes him one because he saved her life by shielding her from the light spear, and she walks away. Then another man approaches him and introduces himself as Yabuki, claiming to be his new roommate. He tells him about Julius and how she is the crown princess of one of the European countries and was blessed with great strength and skills, which she used to climb up the ranks incredibly fast. They both go downstairs to get something to eat and notice Julius being surrounded by 3 guys. The tallest of them seems to be agitated at Julius and wants to duel her, whereas Julius straight up refuses, claiming that he is not strong enough and she has already defeated him 3 times. Yabuki explains that the guy is called Lester and is currently ranked 8th in their academy. Julius starts walking past him, but he grabs her hand and her handkerchief falls to the ground. She bends down, picks it up, and turns towards Lester, full of rage with flames enveloping her from all sides. Ayato feels that the situation could get out of hand, and so he quickly walks up towards them and interrupts them before they could begin their duel in such a crowded place. Thankfully, Lester decides to retreat and goes away, leaving Yabuki, Ayato, and Julius alone. Suddenly, Lester gets a phone call and says that he has to leave. Julius also grabs her bag and starts to walk away before Ayato stops him and asks her whether she could tell him where the boys' dorm is. This gets a chuckle out of her and even puts a smile on Ayato's face. She tells him the direction of the dorm and decides to walk away, but Ayato stops her and reminds her that she owes him one. Julius gets a bit apprehensive about his plans, but in the end, he ends up asking her to show him around the school tomorrow, which she agrees to. The next day, Ayato enters the class alongside Yabuki and greets Julius, who greets him back, totally surprising all the classmates who can't believe that Julius actually returned someone's greeting. He goes on to sit beside her and suddenly notices a sleepy blue-headed girl sitting close by. He thinks that he recognizes her and gets a better look, only to realize that she is his childhood friend Saya. They greet each other and reminisce about the days gone by after school ends, but are interrupted by Julius, who looks visibly jealous, and she tells Ayato that it's time to see the school, as she promised. He turns around to leave with her, but is stopped by Saya, who tells Julius that she doesn't have to do this if she doesn't want to, which gets her all defensive, saying that she owes him a favor and will fulfill it no matter what. Before their argument could end, Claudia entered the classroom, saying that if they couldn't decide amongst themselves, she would be more than willing to take Ayato for a tour herself. This makes both Saya and Julius hash out their differences and agree to take him out together. They go to all the different places that Ayato might want to visit, such as the clubroom or the cafeteria, when Ayato runs off to get something to drink. While he is gone, both Saya and Julius are attacked by a bunch of assailants with light arrows again. This time, however, Saya takes out her grenade launcher and blasts them off alongside the fountain where they were hiding. Ayato hears the commotion and runs back to check on them, only to find the fountain totally destroyed. He asks whether both of them are okay, and they confirm that they are. He goes to meet up with Claudia and mentions the attack on Julius. She replies that the council is on it, and they are trying to find the culprit, but so far they've had no luck. They descend an elevator and arrive at the basement, where Ayato is going to see if he's a match for any of the stronger swords. He didn't want to come and test it out, but after constant pressure from Claudia, he finally agrees. As the door opens, he is surprised to see Lester also present, who volunteered to check the swords. At first, he is sent in, and he picks up a sword to see if he can synchronize with it. If he is able to get a percentage of 32, he'll be claimed as a viable user for the sword. He tries the sword, but can only muster a synchronization of less than 30%. This enrages him, and he tries to force the sword to get synced, which leads to the sword going berserk and trying to attack anyone it can find. It tries attacking Ayato, who gracefully dodges before turning his back towards the sword. The sword again tries to attack him, but this time he dodges it and grabs the handle, shoving it into the floor, taming the sword. He turns towards the screen and spots the look of shock on everyone's faces, as it turns out that the sword ended up sensing with him by a magnitude of more than 90%. He is then approached by Claudia, who asks him if he could meet her in her room that night, and he agrees. He arrives at Claudia's place, which turns out to be a big mansion. He enters it through a window and spots her coming out after taking a bath. She greets him and takes him to her room, where she produces a bunch of cards with the details of 5 students who were supposed to take part in the competition, but were injured one by one to the point where they can't take part in it anymore. Ayato quickly grasps the reason why she told him this. He concludes that the same bunch of people who are targeting Julius must be the ones who hurt these students, and Claudia confirms his suspicions. He asks him for a favor and tells him to stay near Julius whenever possible and protect her from trouble. The next day, he and Julius go out on a date under the guise of Julius showing him around the city. They roam around the city and are having fun before Julius asks him whether they could eat at a fast food restaurant, as because she was a princess, she wasn't really allowed to eat fast food that much. They were having a wonderful lunch but were interrupted by Lester, who once again confronts Julius and challenges her to a duel, and Julius once again declines his request, telling him to get better before challenging her again, as there is nothing for Julius to get out of it apart from humiliating him. This enrages him, and he again starts getting rough. This time, however, Ayato gets up and asks him to back off as she doesn't want to duel him. Lester turns his anger on Ayato and asks whether he wants a fight. He then takes out his axe and tries to attack Ayato, who gracefully dodges the attack and backs off, telling Lester that he can't defeat him. Lester gets even more enraged, but his friends manage to pull him back by saying that Lester only fights fair and square battles, and that he is not the one to attack in a dishonorable fashion. Both Julius and Ayato have their lunch in peace thereafter, without further disturbances, and start walking back to their dorms as the sun starts setting. They suddenly hear a bunch of noise coming from a nearby parking lot and look over to find a bunch of men, seemingly from different academies, fighting with each other. Ayato seems to be confused as to why they are fighting, but Julius is not gullible and realizes that this is a trap. She explains to him that all of these men are basically having a fake fight to distract the actual target, and once the target is distracted, they attack them. And as Julius had predicted, a few stray light arrows fly in her direction. She gets ready and tells Ayato to back off as she's going to deal with all of them on her own, which she does without a hitch. She grabs one of the men and threatens him, telling him to reveal the mastermind behind this attack. The man quickly explains that he was instructed by a hooded figure and points towards the forest, prompting her to run towards the forest. Ayato tries stopping her, but she doesn't listen and starts running. Ayato has a very bad feeling that this is also a setup, and she will be attacked, and he turns out to be right, as she is attacked by 3 hooded figures. As he runs toward her, he comes under attack from a hail of arrows. He manages to dodge them, but they end up tearing his clothing. Julius stops to make sure that he is okay, and by that time, the assailants have run away. She takes him back to her place and asks him to take out his jacket so she can sew the torn part. Ayato does as instructed and she begins sewing. He starts wandering around and spots a framed photograph that seems to be from her childhood. He grabs it to have a look, but instantly Julius takes it away. He asks whether the kids in the frame are her friends and she replies yes. She explains that during her childhood, she was a tomboy who used to sneak out of the castle a lot. One time, 3 large men cornered her in a dark alleyway and she was so terrified that she could only cry. Thankfully, a bunch of girls came from the nearby orphanage and protected her, and they have since become her friends. She explains that her mother wanted to put money in more orphanages, but because of the power dynamics and politics, she can't. She also explains that the main reason why she came to this school was to raise money for the orphanage back home. She finishes sewing and Ayato goes back to his dorm. The next day, when he arrives in the class, he notices that Julius was reading a letter and seems to be distressed. When he asked about it, she brushes it off, stating that it was nothing, but Ayato clearly realizes that something was off. Later that day, she claims that she has to go somewhere and darts off without saying anything. Ayato is worried, so he visits Claudia, who explains to him that the letter must be from her attackers and she doesn't want him to get hurt, so she went in alone. Ayato quickly tells Claudia that he is leaving and going to find and help Julius before jumping out. Julius arrives at a rundown building and enters it. She walks around for a bit, trying to find out where the attackers were before she gets tired of it and straight up calls for the assailant by name. The assailant comes out of hiding, and it turns out to be Norman, one of Lester's cronies, who was there with him every time they had a confrontation. He is surprised that she was able to correctly guess who he was, but she replies that he leaves sinister and cowardly vibes everywhere he goes. He accepts that he was the one who had her attacked, and he was the one who hurt the other players as well. Suddenly, Lester arrives, who is suspicious of him, and ends up overhearing everything. This enrages him, and he calls him a coward to ever attempt such underhanded tactics. He takes out his axe and attacks Norman, but is surprised to see that his axe blow is blocked by a hooded figure. Suddenly, 2 more hooded figures arrive on the scene, and both Lester and Julius assume that they are men from other academies, but it turns out that they are not even humans to begin with. The figures remove their cloaks and are revealed to be mechanical dolls who are controlled by Norman. Lester is not going to back down, and he uses his full power to attack all 3 of the dolls at once, throwing them back, but to his surprise, the dolls get up again and come back to attack him, starting to shoot at him, injuring him in the process. Julius tries to help him, but is stopped by a bunch of dolls. Lester gets up again and tells Norman that a few mechanical dolls are not going to do anything, and that he would need more to stop him. Norman lets out a sinister laugh, asks Lester whether 130 mechanical dolls would be enough, and has both him and Julius surrounded by dolls. Lester gets immediately swarmed, and Julius again tries to help, but is attacked by the robotic dolls. She quickly dodges their attacks and uses her flame magic to blast a bunch of them away, impressing Norman, but he knows that she is still no match against the sheer number of mechanical dolls that he has. The dolls immediately attack Julius, but she skillfully defends herself, dodging and counterattacking them. Some of the dolls start shooting towards her, and she is forced to use a firewall to try and defend herself, but one of the stray bullets is able to get through and hit her on the thigh, making her knees buckle from pain. Immediately afterwards, 2 of the dolls grab her by the arms and shove her into the wall, incapacitating her. Norman orders one of the biggest dolls to attack her, but before it could do so, Ayato finally arrives, launching himself forward, immediately dispatching any and all dolls surrounding her and holding her in his arms. This annoys Norman to his limits, and he orders each and every doll of his to attack Ayato. Julius screams at Ayato for being stupid enough to follow her and put himself in danger, but Ayato merely replies that he has finally found a purpose in life, which is to protect her and make sure she is able to fulfill her dream. This leaves Julius completely shell-shocked, and she is unable to say anything. The dolls start attacking him en masse, shooting at him and swinging their swords at him. Ayato gracefully dodges their attacks and powers up before attacking every single one of them, dispatching almost all of them. Norman calls even more dolls and almost makes an army in front of him. Ayato, on the other hand, does not even break a sweat and begins fighting all of them while carrying Julius in his arms. He's finally able to kill every single doll, making Norman panic. He falls over and can't believe what's happening. He ends up using his trump card, which turns out to be a giant golem-like doll, and setting it on Ayato. The golem rushes towards Ayato and tries to attack him with his massive hands, but Ayato quickly dodges and backs off before powering up again and then rushing into the golem, delivering multiple strikes at once, slashing every single limb and killing it forever. Norman realizes that he has lost, so he quickly grabs one of the still working doll bodies and starts floating out. Julius, however, is in no mood to let him go and uses her power to create ethereal wings behind Ayato's back, and he takes to the sky behind him. Norman tries to escape, but Ayato was way too fast, catching up to him and using his sword to slash through the doll's body. Norman falls from the sky to the ground, but Ayato reassures her that he won't die from this height, and they don't even need to go behind him, as Claudia is already on the ground, ready to catch him. Both Ayato and Julius stare at the sunset for a bit, before suddenly Ayato feels all of his energy being drained immediately and loses consciousness. Julius steers him toward the ground and lets him sleep on her lap. When he wakes up, he is embarrassed, but Julius makes him sleep on her lap again. She asks him what that was about. He explains that this is a very powerful magic which was performed on him by his sister because she didn't want him to use his full power because she thought that might be dangerous for others. While being on her lap, he also asks her whether she would accept him as her partner for the tag team competitions during the Festas, which Julius tearfully accepts. Both he and Julius make a promise to practice every single day for the Festas and make sure that they are able to finish every single duel within 3 minutes, as after around 4 to 5 minutes, Ayato's body gives in and he collapses from fatigue. He gets late to his practice with Julius one day, and while running towards the practice ground, he ends up bumping into a young blue-haired girl, and both of them end up falling over. He quickly gets up, apologizes to her, and offers a helping hand. She seems to be very flustered, and in a hurry, they say their goodbyes and move in their respective directions. Ayato quickly runs towards the practice field and finds a very angry Julius, who is fuming because he got late. A sparring session starts and Julius begins the attack and uses her flame projectiles, shooting them towards Ayato. He is able to block all of them and gets ready for another volley. This time, instead of standing and defending, he rushes in, dodging every single projectile, closing the distance between them as he knows he is stronger in close combat. Julius, however, knows this about him and sets a trap for him. As soon as he steps into a particular circle, he is enveloped in a fire tornado, but by using his special abilities, he is able to slash through it and force her to yield. Julius seems to be a bit sad because she can't seem to win against him. Ayato tells her that at their current level, they should be able to easily defeat everyone, but she disagrees, saying that there are more than 20 people far stronger than them, and it is going to be a very hard-fought battle. Suddenly, the door opens and Lester, alongside Saya, enters the room. Saya chides Julius for keeping Ayato all to herself, whereas Lester came here to apologize and thank him for saving his life. Ayato tells him not to think too much about it, as he is sure that if he were in danger, Lester would save him as well. Not long after, the door opens up again and Claudia enters the room alongside 2 unknown girls. She introduces them as Camelia and Ernesta. Ernesta seems to have a very bubbly personality, whereas Camelia seems to be opposite of her. Claudia informs them that both of their schools are forging a contract for the development of new and stronger swords. Ernesta ends up playfully revealing that she was the one who made all those robots and was very surprised when Ayato was able to defeat them so easily. This enrages both Saya and Julius, who take out their weapons on Ernesta. Camelia notices Saya's weapon and asks her about it, before mocking its construction, claiming that it is a very old and faulty technology. Saya accepts that the technology is old, but she also tells her that it was created by her father and she can't hear a slight on him, and tells Camelia to take back her words. Camelia refuses to do so, as she says she isn't going to deny anything that she believes to be true. Things start getting heated, but Claudia intervenes, saying that they can fight all they want once the festas start, but right now both Ernesta and Camelia are their guests. Hearing this, Saya turns towards Ayato and tells him that she wants to be his partner. This surprises Julius, and she tells her that she has already claimed Ayato. One day, while walking with Yabuki, he notices the same girl that he ended up bumping into a couple days ago, being slapped by an older man. Before the man could slap her again, however, he rushes to her defense and grabs the man's arm. The man shoves him away and says that he should stay away from matters that don't concern him. He introduces himself as Tudo, the young girl's uncle, who's named Kirin. Ayato is shocked at this revelation and questions him about why he would ever hurt his niece, to which he replies that it's none of his business. Ayato says that now it is his business and he wouldn't let him hurt her. Tuno walks up to him and tells him that they are going to have a duel, and if Ayato wins, he will never be violent against Kirin again. Ayato accepts the duel, but Tudo turns around and says that Kirin will be dueling with him. Ayato is shocked as he doesn't want to duel her, but she says sorry and tells him that she has no choice, and the duel starts. They have a go at each other, and Ayato quickly realizes that this girl is extremely skilled, as he can't even touch a hair on her body. Both of them keep trying to strike each other, but they seem to be equally skilled and are at a standstill. The duel keeps going on, and Ayato realizes that he needs to finish this quickly because it has already been 5 minutes and he can't keep this going much longer, forcing him to take a rough and rushed decision. She is able to take advantage of this and is able to chip away at his clothes twice, and the time of the duel ends, leading to Kirin's victory. She apologizes to him and thanks him for interfering before running after her uncle. Julius approaches him and asks him why he fought that girl and ever thought that he could defeat her, as she is the ranked one in their school. Ayato collapses from fatigue and is taken away by Julius to her chamber, where she puts her down on a couch to rest. She comes back later and Ayato asks whether she is mad at him. She answers him honestly that she is. Ayato asks her if it is because he had a duel with another person, but she replies that it is not because of that, as if she were in his place she would have done the same. But the fact that he got defeated by her was the thing that was bothering her more, because she really wanted Ayato to win. She tells him that at this very moment there are only 3 people in the academy who she can't defeat. The first one is Ayato, the second is Claudia, who is ranked 2, and the last one is the first-ranked Kirin. Ayato didn't know up until now that Claudia was one of the strongest people in this school and is surprised to hear this. Julius explains to him that she has the ability to see up to 10 seconds in future and is able to figure out an opponent's next attack very easily. He returns to his dorm, and on the way he is called by Yabuki, who tells him that Kirin is waiting for him and wants to talk to him. He takes her to his room and offers her something to drink. She starts talking and thanks him again for trying to protect her from her uncle. He tells her that she never needed her help to begin with, and he didn't know the true extent of her strength. Before she could speak anymore, however, he stopped her, walked over to the door, and opened it to see that a bunch of guys were trying to overhear their conversation. He then gets Kirin and moves outside of his dorm and goes for a walk while talking to her. While walking together, she seems to be very nervous, so Ayato decides to make her feel comfortable and starts talking about swordsmanship, as he knows she seems to be very invested in that. He talks about her family's swordsmanship style, which impresses Kirin, as her style is very niche, and not many people know about it. She, in turn, also knows Ayato's family style of swordsmanship, and remarks that it is a very ancient style of fighting. She starts going in very deep, telling him about all the things she loves about swordsmanship, and Ayato lets out a chuckle, stating how comfortable she is talking about it. Later, Ayato asks her the reason why she is fighting, and she replies that she is doing it to save her father, but doesn't elaborate any further. Ayato takes the hint and doesn't persist in wanting to know more. She asks him about how he trains, and he explains that he trains with Julius, and asks her to join them, but she replies that she isn't very comfortable with training with multiple people. To this, he replies that she could join him in his daily morning sessions where he trains alone, and she ends up agreeing to train with her. He bids her farewell and is about to get back, but is jumped by Saya, who grabs him from behind and demands to know who the girl was. He tells her that she is Kirin, and she loosens her grip. He asks her what she is doing here, and she replies that she came here to get an answer to whether he will be in a tag team with her. He apologizes to her and says that he has already made a team with Julius and can no longer back off from the agreement. She understands him and moves back. After that, every day in the mornings he starts training with Kirin, and later on he spars with Julius. One day, while they were running, they suddenly realized that the mist had grown around them, and they felt like they were being watched. Kirin tells him that she feels like whatever is spying on them is not a human. Suddenly, weird lizard dog-looking creatures emerge from the bushes. They surround both of them quickly and get ready to attack. One of the monsters attacks him, and he defends himself while pushing the monster back. He then unsheaths his sword and chops off one of the beast's limb, but surprisingly, it regrows its limbs and shoots a fireball at him. He avoids the fireball, but 2 more beasts come after him. He lands multiple strikes on them and skewers both of them at once, but surprisingly, they just melt off and remake themselves into whole creatures. Kirin decides to try something, and once the beast attacks her, she quickly uses her sword to chop into small pieces, and is able to find the core inside of the body, chopping it in half and killing the creature, and forcing the others to dart off. They recollect themselves, but before they have any time, the beasts reappear and unleash a barrage of fire blasts at them, which weakens the road beneath Ayato, and it collapses. Kirin grabs his hand to try and protect him, but ends up getting pulled by his weight as well. Both of them fall into the sewage system below, and Kirin clings onto Ayato as she doesn't know how to swim. Ayato reassures her that everything would be fine and tries to make his way towards the side, but is interrupted by a huge monster. It attacks him, but Ayato was able to dodge. It keeps coming back at him again and again, and Ayato keeps dodging its blows. Kirin feels responsible for slowing him down, so she tells him to leave her be and fight on his own, but he refuses. He takes out his sword and cuts a pillar to make a ledge for them to stand on. The beast comes again, and this time he beheads it, but surprisingly, it regenerates as well. He decides to power up and uses his sword to slash the beast right down the middle, splitting it in 2 and killing the core. Afterwards, they are rescued from the sewage, and they go their separate ways. Tuna walks towards Kirin, and asks her where she was. She explains the situation and he tells her to stay away from Ayato. She, however, decides to take a stand and refuses. Tudo is shocked and he turns around, slapping her in the face. She still keeps the defiant look on her face, making Tudo try to punch her. But this time, she stops the punch and tells him that this time she will be doing things her own way. She requests for an official duel against Ayato and he accepts. They meet in the arena, where a lot of people gather around to witness the legendary fight. The battle starts and both of them draw their swords. Kirin goes on the offensive and starts using multiple slashes at once to get at him, but he dodges and blocks every single attack, surprising her. She then attacks him again, and this time she is able to break his sword. Surprisingly enough, he takes out a spear from behind his back and starts attacking her with it, before throwing it at her and taking out 2 small daggers to fight. He seems to be getting under her nerves as she tries to defend herself, but finally she's able to disarm him, thinking she finally won. To her surprise, however, Ayato ends up using a grappling technique and slams her to the ground, winning the duel. They both go back to the locker room with high spirits, and Kirin even ends up asking Julius to let her practice with them, and Julius agrees. Shortly after, Tudo starts banging at the door and gets in. He seems to be extremely mad at Kirin because she lost the duel and decides to punch her. This time, Ayato stops his punch and pushes him back before Claudia threatens him with her authority and he leaves. The next day, both Julius and Ayato overlook Kirin, with Seiyo trying to fight as a team, but they can't seem to be in sync. They are making a lot of mistakes, and instead of fighting the enemies together side by side, they are having individual battles on 2 sides. The sparring session gets over and their score comes out to be excessively low compared to Ayato and Julius. Ayato believes that only more training could bring their score up, but Seiyo has a different plan altogether and tells Ayato that both she and Kirin will be skipping the training session the next day and are going to socialize. Ayato has no idea what she means by that, but agrees. The next day, Kirin and Seiyo meet outside, but neither of them is very extroverted or goes out often, so they don't even know how to socialize. Seiyo takes the lead and takes her to some places that she likes, and slowly they start getting in the groove and end up having a very good day together, and their communication increases. The next day, both Seiyo and Kirin attend the training session again, but this time Ayato feels as if they are bound by a string. They are perfectly in sync and are working as a team. Seiyo takes care of every single opponent that is not close by, whereas Kirin takes care of the one in close range. Together, they are able to make quick work of all the robots, and their sync rate shoots through the roof, making them an even better team than Ayato and Julius. Both of them are completely surprised and wonder what they did in one day that helped them so much. The day of the Festas arrives, and both Julius and Ayato attend the opening ceremony. He is totally taken aback by the extent of this competition. It is very professionally set with commentators and giant screens. After the opening ceremony, both of them go back and meet up with Seiyo and Kirin, who came to cheer them on as well and hand over a big lunchbox that both of them prepared together. The 4 of them go into the cafeteria and end up eating the entire lunchbox together. The commentators announce that the matches are about to begin and quickly go over the rules. They clarify that the matches will be deemed over once the school badges are destroyed or the competitors voluntarily accept their defeat or they are knocked out. The first match is going to be between Ayato and Julius against a rank 41 player. Julius and Ayato have a plan and don't want to display their true teamwork and strategy so early in the matches. They both enter the arena and the match is announced. Both of their opponents seem to be fired up as well. Julius tells Ayato that she doesn't think he needs any help for this match and that he should deal with them on his own as she doesn't want to reveal their techniques yet. Ayato agrees. The battle starts and Ayato immediately powers up, takes out his sword, and in a very flamboyant fashion, strikes both of them at once and breaks their badges in the matter of seconds. The entire crowd went into an uproar watching the match as it ended so quickly and in such a fantastic fashion that it made a very big impression. He walks back to Julius, who congratulates him, and then both of them go towards the people from the news who want to take their interview. After the interview, they go back to their room and witness the next match that is between 2 robots made by Ernesta and Camellia against 2 high-ranking students. Even before the match begins, the bigger robot claims that he is so strong that he is going to give the opponents a handicap by providing them with a grace period of 1 minute in which they can attack him all they want. The crowd roars with anticipation, whereas the opponents don't take well to this but accept their proposal nonetheless with a burning hatred towards them and a want to defeat them. The match starts and one of the guys rushes straight towards the bigger robot and uses his wind magic to create a tornado around his hands and attacks the robot, but to his surprise, the robot has a protective shield around it, which deflects every single attack without even moving a single muscle. The other guy chases the smaller robot and shoots at it, but the robot has an incredible accuracy and uses its own gun to shoot the bullets flying towards her. The person with wind magic tries one last-ditch effort to defeat the robot and uses his strongest attack against it, but again it has no effect. Both of the humans fall down from exhaustion, making Camellia and Ernesta the victors. Both Julius and Ayato go out for a walk while waiting for their next match, but while coming back they end up hearing a commotion, and when they reach the crowd they spot a girl beating the crap out of a bunch of guys. Julius seems to recognize her and informs Ayato that she is one of the strongest fighters and was supposed to be in prison because of her sinister nature. Irene notices them and seems to be taking an interest as she walks straight up to Ayato and asks him for his name. Julius stands in front of him and asks him what she needs from him. Irene ignores her and tries to talk to him, but Julius interjects again, saying that fighting in public places is against the rules and she could get disqualified from the tournament. Before she could reply, however, she is called upon by her sister, and she instantly changes her demeanor. The younger sister is named Priscilla, and she apologies for the commotion caused by her sister and takes her back. Julius and Ayato return back to the arena as they are going to be fighting next. The match starts, and this time their opponents are two girls. This time, however, Julius takes the helm and decides to fight both of them. She creates her flame magic and shoots the projectile at them. They both try to run away and dodge the fireballs, but one of them twists her leg and gets hit by the fireball and gets defeated. The other girl is able to defend herself from the fireballs, but Julius is able to set up a trap for her and defeats her easily as well. Both Julius and Ayato return back to their room and decide to watch the next match between Lester and Irene. At the start, Lester seems to be holding his own, but in the middle of the match, Irene walks up to her sister and literally sucks the blood out of her neck like a vampire, which seems to fuel her, and her energy gets boosted. She is then easily able to defeat both Lester and his partner. Suddenly, Ayato gets a call from Kirin, who tells him that she was with Saya, but suddenly she disappeared and she can't find her. He tells her that he would be there soon and leaves. While on the way, he bumps into Priscilla, who is running away from a bunch of goons. He quickly grabs her and jumps on one of the rooftops. She thanks him and tells that these goons were from the casino because her sister must have caused a commotion there. Suddenly, Irene appears there, angry at Ayato, thinking that he was the one behind the attack. Priscilla, however, is able to stop her and explains that Ayato saved her. Irene calms down and thanks Ayato. Alongside that, Priscilla invites Ayato over for lunch. He also gets a call from Kirin, who tells him that she found Seo, who just went into a store. Ayato goes back to Julius, and together they go to Priscilla's place for lunch. She greets them at the door and invites them inside. Irene is already sitting on the table and tells Ayato that she is taking part in this tournament because she has been given the job to destroy Ayato. She says that she is only telling him this because he saved her sister, and also informs him that tomorrow's match is going to be between their teams. Ayato thanks her and has lunch with them before leaving. Both Ayato and Julius part ways for the night and get mentally prepared for the big day tomorrow. The next day arrives and both him and Julius arrive in the arena. Irene seems to have already sucked a bit of blood from Priscilla as she seems to be more powerful than usual. All of them draw out their weapons and Julius initiates the fight by shooting a bunch of flaming balls at Irene, who is able to block them with her scythe. Ayato doesn't give her any time to recover and rushes her into a sword fight. She is successfully able to defend herself against Ayato, but decides that she cannot win in a sword fight. Julius shoots some more fiery projectiles towards her, but surprisingly, Irene ends up creating a gravity shield around them, which blocks the attacks. She learned to create this gravity shield just so she can better protect Priscilla from any damage. She proceeds to suck even more blood from Priscilla, which weakens her down and she collapses. Irene, however, seems to be losing control over herself as she ignores Priscilla and walks towards Julius and Ayato. She tries to capture both of them in a gravity prison, but they have quick reflexes and are able to dodge the attack. Julius fires an attack towards her, but she blocks them completely. Before she could recover, however, Ayato ends up attacking her. They end up in a back and forth, but this time she seems to be able to hold her own and pushes Ayato back. After that, she creates a bunch of gravity balls and shoots them towards Ayato, who uses his special technique, which increases his speed, and he slashes through every single ball. This shocks Irene as she didn't expect him to be this fast. Ayato rushed towards her again, but this time Julius also uses her flame wall around her, which Irene is easily able to cut through. But it turns out that the smaller attack was just a decoy and a setup for an insanely strong flame explosion, which catches Irene off guard and injures her. Surprisingly, however, she is still standing and stumbles towards Priscilla, grabbing her and starting to suck her blood out even after she goes unconscious. Ayato realizes that she has lost control of herself, and if they don't intervene, Priscilla's life could be in danger. She starts getting a boost in power, which is so high that her body can't house it, and her own life starts to be in danger. Ayato powers up to his maximum level and rushes towards her, engaging her in a sword fight. He is able to hit the scythe out of her hand and slashes it into 2 pieces, before crushing the gem inside of it, destroying it. Irene immediately goes limp and collapses unconscious. Ayato's team is declared the winner of the tournament, but even Ayato ends up using more power than he had and gets knocked out. All of them are sent to a hospital, and thankfully all of them are safe. Julius discusses with Ayato about what they are going to do in further matches, but before they could talk, Saya, Kirin, and Claudia all came inside of the room, fussing over whether Ayato is alright and making sure that he is completely healed before his next match.